Okay, well, welcome back. This is module 9, and this is day 4. We call this the patient training day. So, if we want to think about putting systems into our office, this is the day where those systems get implemented. And if you wanted to build a office that starts to run itself, where everybody on your team, your staff, associate docs if you have them, yourself, and the patients know exactly what happens during a patient visit and during the day. So there is order in your office, there's less chaos, people get predictable and great results, and you can really be fulfilled at the end of the day knowing that things are running very, very smoothly. So this is the day where we implement all of those systems and all of the training that you've done up to this point. This is where it all gets implemented. So the whole objective of day 4 is to, first of all, reassure their patients. So they've just come from the doctor's report the day before or during that week. We want to keep it very timely. And we want to reassure them on their decision to start care. So they've made a commitment to start care. We are reassuring them on this decision. We're going to finalize the details from the new patient to now a practice member. And this is the big difference. So day 4 is the transition. It's the jump from taking them from that new patient who's just gone through the day 1, day 2, day 3 to now they become a full-fledged practice member. And we're going to train them to be compliant with all of the office procedures. The more that you can train your patients to let them know this is what happens during their visits in the office, the easier it gets for you and the more opportunity you'll have to build a big, sustaining practice over the long term, and also something that's reproducible. So if you do end up getting associate docs, or if you eventually want to sell your office is very scalable. It has the systems in place, and that's very attractive to a buyer. So the first thing when that patient comes in from day 4 and we train with our team, we give them a warm welcome back. I mean, they are the most important person of the day. That's the mentality. So we're really happy to see them. We want to reassure them that they've made the right decision to start the corrective process. So we're reaffirming in their mind. A lot of things happen after day 3 in the patient's mind. They question, did they make the right decision? This is a big commitment financially. Are they going to be able to put the time in to do this? So when they do come in on day 4, we want to quench all of those concerns and just reassure them that this is the right decision and everything's going to be fine. So that's what we train with the team. So we finalize any loose ends with the care plan. So that was what the team would do. First of all, if there's any loose ends, if they didn't get the credit card details, if the credit card didn't go through, or the automatic payments or EFT wasn't finalized, that will all get done at this point. So we want their payment plan done. We want to make sure we encourage every single patient, and I would even say insist that every single patient that stays in your office for them to be a practice member goes on a care plan. When people are coming in and paying every visit, it is a complete waste of time. It's a waste of the patient's time. It's a waste of the team's time. It slows you down and it limits your ability to grow. Plus, it's a lack of commitment on the patient's part. If they're not willing to go on a care plan to correct what they're there for, correct their spine, correct their nervous system, see the results, there's an incongruency. So we have to address that, and that's all part of building up that day 1, day 2, day 3, and closing it on day 4 if it's not closed yet. So we want to make sure that is all the bows are tied up. We also, with regard to the care plan, if they've chosen the monthly option, our team would re-offer the opportunity to prepay for the entire care plan and itemize the discount. Like, this is how much you would save if you prepaid for the few months or for the year, whatever your care plan is. If you prepaid for that, you would save a lot of money. So we re-offer that. And many times they were very successful at getting the person to say, yeah, let's just put the whole thing on my card. We make sure that the family is checked or at least booked to be checked. So if they hadn't listed their children, or if they hadn't made appointments for their children or their spouse, on the night of the doctor's report, then we would revisit that and make sure that we are closing that loop as well. So we confirm and complete the schedule of care. So if they're supposed to be here 3 times a week for 8 weeks, or 3 times a week for 12 weeks, and then 2 times a week for another 12 weeks, whatever the care plan is, we want to make sure that that is all closed up and those appointments are booked. So if they said they can make it Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 9:45, we book those appointments and we book them all out for 12 weeks. Or at least if the person is perhaps not confident in their schedule, or their schedule's changing, or they work shifts, or whatever the case is, we would at least want to book it out to the first re-exam. So for the first 4 weeks minimum. So we confirm and complete the schedule of care, at least until the first re-exam. We then go over the check-in procedures. So when they come in the door, we talk to them about this is how it works. This is where you would hang your coat. This is where you would take your boots off. We don't wear wet boots into the office if it's a winter time, or if it's a really mucky or rainy day or snowy day. We leave all the wet clothes out in the foyer, in the lobby, wherever, whatever that has to happen. We then would talk about their key fob. How would they check in? So if you have an automated system, like if you're using Atlas, or if you're using Platinum, or whatever the case is, the patient would get a key fob and they would check in, and we would show them the check-in procedures, what they would have to do, whether they sign in, whether they check in with their key fob or their card. We'd show them obviously where the bathroom is, and if they had to go to the bathroom, they would do that before they start their check-in procedures. And there's a reason for that, because once they're activated in the system, or if they pick a number in the system, whether you use a number system or whether your computer uses the voice activated queue system, we would want to make sure that they're ready when their name gets called or when their number comes up, to be ready to go to that adjusting area. So we would talk to them all about those procedures on day 4 as well. And then the team would take them through and demonstrate any warm-up procedures. So if you have your patients do wall tractioning or wobbling or any type of pre-adjustment stretching, we would show them exactly how that happens, where they would do that, and how they would go to those areas. Maybe they're wearing Cerviguards or whatever the case is. We would make sure that they understood exactly how that all comes together before their adjustment. So then we would bring them to the adjusting table and show them, how when their cue comes up or when their number comes up, where they would go. They would look for the open adjusting bay or the open adjusting table, and they would go to that. If you had some sort of a system, or maybe the rooms are numbered, or whoever that is, they would go to the table. And then when they get to the table, what happens? So do you want them sitting? Do you want them lying down? Do they lie down in position? And I would say we always had patients lie down in the position where they would be ready to receive their first adjustment. Also, we had the staff trained to talk to them about this is not the time to start asking questions. The doctor's very busy. He's allocated a certain amount of time for each adjustment. There's not time, or there's not time for you to ask the doctor questions during this time. If you do have questions, what is the protocol for that? Perhaps you have to have the staff trained to answer those questions as best as possible. Or if there's a question the staff can answer, perhaps they write it down and that goes on the doctor's call list for the end of the day. So that just keeps the adjusting times very specific and very succinct, very precise. So they would lie on the table, you pre-frame that interaction with the doctor. In fact, we often had the staff tell the patients that if they're not lying down, if the doctor walks in the room and they're sitting up, or they're not lying down in position, the doctor will leave the room until they go and lie back down and go to the next person. So they would lose their place in line. So that's why we encourage them to lie down. And this was all done in a very compassionate way, but it was done in the fact that, hey, we're on a mission to save lives here. And, there's a lot of people that need care. So we just want them to be part of the team and part of the mission. And this is all being part of the mission. So we pre-frame that interaction. The doctor would come in, then do the adjustment. He or she would try to be very specific. And so what we did in our office, because we were so busy, is that the talking would be minimal. We had a specific table talk set out for the day. It wouldn't be a lot of, hi, how are you? It would be, hey, the story of the day is this. Great to see you. Let's get your power turned on, whatever that is. And we tried to keep the talking time very, very minimal during that adjustment time. So then there was the time after the adjustment where the staff would actually train the people that once the doctor finishes that adjustment, he would post the notes in the computer or she would post the notes in the computer and walk out of the room. And it was the patient's responsibility to then put the table back in position. We would show them how to adjust the headpiece. We would show them how to change the paper. And if they needed to wipe down the table, and we had some cleanser and some sanitary wipes so they could wipe down the table afterwards. So the table would be ready for the next person to come in and then they would leave the room. So the staff would train them on that. And then the staff would show them any post-adjustment therapy. So we had our patients doing head weights or vibration plates or whatever it is you do after the adjustment. Maybe they just leave at that point, depending on what your technique is or what your protocols surrounding to support that technique are. But we would train them all on that procedure. So the day 4 visit sometimes could last 20 to 30 minutes by the time the staff went over everything with them. But it was really important to instill those procedures so the patient understood why they were there. And then the closing part, and this was really important. So after the adjustment was done and all of the pre-warm up, the post-warm up of the adjustment, the procedures, the number system, the training of how to clean up the room afterwards, change the paper, clean the table, the person would come to the front desk and then the closing would happen with the team. So the team would talk about, okay, you're all set. They would confirm the schedule. They would have a print off of their schedule, or they would have that schedule emailed to that patient. They would book any advanced talk. So anything that's coming up. So whether it was a patient dinner, whether it was an advanced talk, maybe a nutrition talk or some sort of a special talk or guest speaker that was coming up within the next few weeks or next month, they would make sure that that person was scheduled, or at least they encouraged that person to schedule for that advanced talk. And then one really important question that would happen before the patient left was, do you remember the night of the doctor's report? That was obviously a very inspiring night. Who was going through your mind? And this would be worded very intentionally. Who was going through your mind that needs to be here based on what Dr. Collin was talking about during that doctor's report? And the staff would really encourage that patient to think of a name. Is there somebody at your church? Is there somebody at your kid's school, a neighbor of yours, a family member, one of your friends, anybody that you know locally that really needs to know what you learned during that doctor's report? And so the person ultimately would come up with a name, and this was the call to action was, hey, if I give you Dr. Collins' number, would you do a three-way text message with that person to introduce that person to Dr. Collin? And then they can engage in a conversation about what's going on, but at least you'd be there to support that conversation. You would make the initial introduction. And that was a great way to bridge the gap as far as teaching the patient how to refer other people. People need to be taught on how to refer, but that was a good way to bridge the gap. So they would do the three-way text. The staff would also offer gift certificates. So if you know people that are at your church or neighbors of yours, here's a couple of gift certificates that will give them a reduced fee examination. So you can pass those out. Make sure you write your name on them so we know who sent them in. And they would also have an expiry date. So we created some urgency with those gift certificates as well. And then we also did patient appreciation dinners and community appreciation dinners. We would invite that person to the dinner and ask if they would like to invite somebody. In fact, our team was so good, they would ask if they wanted to reserve an entire table. And we had tables of 10, circular tables of 10. If they wanted to reserve an entire table, they would get a table up to the front and they would get preferential treatment by getting up to the buffet line first. So many people would come in and say, yep, I've got a table of 10. So that was another way, again, to bridge the gap and get people really engaged. And that's the whole purpose of day 4 is to get people engaged in your culture, engaged in your system. And then they would obviously leave with that printed schedule of their care and or their email of their scheduled appointments. So that was the general high-level overview of what happens on day 4. But as you can see, we trained on all those systems. and we put those systems in place and we regularly trained on them. And so the majority of our patients understood the system. So it made seeing 1,200 patient visits a week relatively easy. It was not chaotic because if you didn't have those systems in place, it would be just total chaos. Nobody would know where they're going or what they're doing. There would be no order. So that was the way we created order in a very busy office. Hope this helps. We'll see you in the next module.